Well, we're sticking with our last names, except our dogs, he insists on calling Haynes Wilson. I don't know why they get Wilson at the end. That's what they do, right? Jimmy Haynes Wilson, Jefferson Haynes Wilson, and Jose Aberd.
Oh, I see.
So they'll carry on. That's our legacy, the dogs and the bird. I hear it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're good.
I hear it. Thank you. You guys are so great. Well, this is a first, and maybe a last. We'll see how it goes. You can tell us, because we don't usually do this together, and we have not really.
We've done an arena.
We did do an arena some years ago. That's right.
Arena?
Yeah.
Arena Mexico.
In an arena.
Oh no. That's next. If this goes well, the Hollywood Bowl. Yeah.
We've heard that before.
You never know. So for a number of years, actually, we thought about, since my mother passed away in 1997, we thought, well, maybe we should, because we both very close to her. She loved Christopher very, very much, and he, in fact, met her before he met me. So he had his own relation with her. So I thought, well, for years I thought, well, no, I'm not going to talk about my mother, But then I realized recently when we were talking about this, that's not fair, really. And, she shouldn't have to pay the price of being my mother and not being ever talked about, because she's more than my mother. She was a great disciple of MeherBaba, according to MeherBaba. And Baba said she was a great disciple. So if he said that, and she was, and we have this intimate knowledge of her life and work, then take away that she was my mother, and let's share about her. So that's how we got here. And the other thing to say of how we got here is that it really isn't about her at all. And I thought about it recently. I thought, no, it isn't about Jane. Just like I don't think my stories are really about me, or anybody's stories are about them. It's about Baba. It's about MeherBaba. And every story about everyone who had contact with Baba and who has contact with Baba now, all of your stories are really not about us. They're about MeherBaba. Because every story reveals something new about him, something wonderful about him. And so, yes, we have to share, because that's why he gave us the stories. It's to learn more about him, not about Jane, but about him. So I think that's why we got here today. We'll see how we do.
Yeah, so we hope there's something in this story that might resonate with you. And I think we're thinking of this as a kind of elegy for Jane. She died 18 years ago, and we do want to try to preserve her memory. She was such a remarkable person, and if there's one theme that we really want to emphasize in this, it's that she somehow carried Baba around with her. That was my experience. Not just when she was talking about Baba or meeting with visitors, it was definitely there during those times, but even in just very casual moments, like going out to eat in some not very good restaurant in Myrtle Beach, like that awful Mexican place called Rosalinda's. There was just something about Baba being with her. There was something luminous. So I'll leave it at that. And I think parts of the story might get to why that was. I think she would have maybe been a little embarrassed that we were doing this, because she was a very private person who was in a very public role at the center. But I hope she would also feel honored on some level. And thank you for letting us do this. It's been such a wonderful thing to go back to her journals and her letters and her photographs, and to really probe deeper into her life, her connection with Baba, and our times with her. So we thought we should start with Baba. This is a photograph she received when she and Charles and Marie were living in New York, sent by Baba, 62, so this would have been just before the East-West Gathering. So Jane Berry Haynes was born in 1924 in Durham, North Carolina, and her dad, John Berry Haynes, was the editor of the Durham newspaper. I think you can see some of the resemblance there. Doesn't that look like Charles?
Yeah.
And then this is her mother, Jane Dixon, so that's Jane as an infant.
Oh, precious.
And here Jane is in, I guess, middle school, out on the playground with the water fountain.
Looks like Wendy.
It does. It does look like Wendy. She, some of this she told us, some we got from her journals, but she said that when she was a little girl, she loved repeating the words forever and ever. And she loved thinking about the concept of eternity. And that was a comfort for her. But when she spoke about the 33 years that she lived until meeting Baba, there was always a kind of sadness about her years growing up and her early adulthood. And this is what she wrote in her journal. Growing up meant pain of never measuring up, wanting, needing love so desperately, fears. Only joy was at Christmas time, comfort in reading, music, hearing my mother play the piano, and she and my father singing together. Then my mother's long illness, a pain of memory that only God understands. And this is a story that she wrote about in her journal. It's something that happened in 1962 at the East-West Gathering, and it goes back to her childhood. 1962 East-West Gathering. On the bus, on the way to Ezad, I sat with Nina, Baba's disciple since the early days. I believe it was on the way back from MeherBabaLibrary that he suddenly began singing the song, "Wherever you go, whatever you do, I want you to know I'm following you." And Nina said that in the early days that Baba loved that song. My heart contracted with a sweet pain. So Charles, we decided we're not going to try here.
You decided, I didn't decide.
Ever since a child, my father sang that as my mother played the piano in our home. It was one of the few happy memories of childhood. And the refrain, "I want you to know I'm following you," remained deep in my consciousness. I knew that day, November '62, that the beloved had always been with me. She briefly attended University of North Carolina at Greensboro to study journalism, but then she left school to work in the Army Emergency Relief at Camp Southern North Carolina when the war broke out. And she met an Army captain and married when she was just 18 years old, and they had one child, Diana, and then divorced a couple of years later. But in the late 1940s, she married her childhood friend, Sonny Haynes, Charles's father, and they had 3 children, John, Charles, and Wendy. And she began a career as a theater director in Durham, and she went on to start theaters in Myrtle Beach eventually, and in Pennsylvania. So here's Jane with Sonny Haynes. And this must be Charles.
Good to see you.
Here is Jane with Wendy when she was first born, and the little blonde, you can tell it's Charles.
My brother John.
And John. And this was around that time. She first went to Myrtle Beach in 1947. And she had felt this pull to go there. And her family didn't really want to go. And in her journal she wrote, "I would beseech Sonny and his family to please take me there. They preferred the mountains." Finally they said, "If it means so much to you, why don't you just go there by yourself?" And she did. So she did. So here she is at the beach. She went by herself. She said, "I can still feel the cool breeze as I stood in the surf hours each day, pretending to fish, just experiencing the beauty of the sea, the silence. In those days, there were no buildings to the right or left for miles on end." So Little Beach was very different place. Picture it all looking like the center. Then in the 1950s, her work took her to settle in Myrtle Beach. she was asked to set up this theater called the Myrtle Beach Playhouse in the ballroom of this beautiful old hotel, the Ocean Forest Hotel, which no longer stands, and to be the associate director there. And it was a star system professional theater, meaning that these stars would come during the summer and perform in her plays. And these were often stars whose glory days had passed. And so they were kind of 1920s and 30s actors that most people don't know now.
John Ireland, Alan Alda.
Not Alan Alda.
His father, Robert Alda, that's right, his father, oh gosh. Charlie Ruggles. You have to be very old to know these things. Alan Talbot's nodding. These are my childhood heroes.
So she would direct these plays in the ballroom of this hotel, and then she would sometimes star in the play. So here she is in one place. This is her friend Dan Edwards was in the play, and then here, I think this was for the play Solid Gold Cadillac, is that right?
Yes.
Carousel Star Theater, and that's Jane seated in the middle, and that's Jane. All right, so then we come to finally how she got to the center, and it all happened because of Yazoo Cooks. Does anybody know who that is?
Yes.
She actually has become a kind of gay icon. It's a funny thing, Zazu Phipps, right? She, this bar's named after Zazu Phipps, so she lives on. But, so, all of this life that she lived, to me, it's an example of how Baba is. That she had to live that life in order to, in this life, come into his physical contact and do whatever it is she was going to do for him. So it was, she always felt in her early years that she was going to die at 33. And she turned out, that's when she met MeherBaba. So she did. And so her new life began. So to tell this story, I have to say there was one time in the 1950s when she had some experience of MeherBaba in this conscious lifetime, explicitly, and that was when MeherBaba came to the United States. I believe it was the 52 visit, not the 56, but in any case, a picture appeared in the father's newspaper. Father was the editor of the Durham Sun. Of MeherBaba. You know how sometimes they have little articles, but she remembers only that there was this photograph. She didn't know who it was, but she saw the photograph. And that night she had a dream. And in her dream, there was this big fence. And she was on one side of the fence, and on the other side of the fence were all these people, very happy, enjoying each other, having a great time, joyous, and she was on the other side of the fence. That was her dream. So that was in the early 50s. Now, in 1957, to get to this story, and I'll try to only get to the core of the story, because it's a big story. I'm going to just do the core of the story. Oh yeah, you should say.
So there was one other little funny thing.
One little thing.
So Charles's grandmother, they called Granny. So it's Sonny Haynes' mother, so Jane's mother-in-law, who was a very kind of challenging person.
Think of every stereotype of the Southern.
So think of these Southern ladies where they can seem very polite and then they say something that's really cutting underneath, like, bless your heart, it's really electric heat. And so she was riding in the car, I guess with her husband, Sonny, and the mother-in-law, and they passed by the land that was the center. This is before Jane knew anything about Baba. And Granny said, oh, look at that over there. That place, I read about this. There's an Indian man who has come there and visited. Jane, that seems like something you'd be interested in.
Just to say, there was no love lost between Granny and my mother. That's a whole other story. There was no love lost. And Granny was always like this with my mother. But Mother never forgot that. She never forgot that. And she was interested. That, she was intrigued by that. So, 1957. This is how it is. This is how Baba works, as you all know so well. This is how it is. Zazu Pitts is starring in Solid Gold Cadillac at the Mother's Theater. Norina passed away. Went to Baba. Now, Norina Machiavelli, of course, is, I think everyone knows, and Elizabeth worked together to found the center in Myrtle Beach. And Norina was one of Baba's great disciples. He called her his mother in the West. So, you know, I don't need that to say more. But Princess Norina Machiavelli and this whole story of her. Anyway, she passed away. She goes to Baba June of 1957. And Zazu Pitts is in Myrtle Beach. And Zazu Pitts, and this is why I'm sitting here today, truly, Zazu Pitts saw in the newspaper an obituary of Norina Machiavelli. And in the obituary, it mentions the center and MeherBabaLibrary and so forth, and Zazu Pitts sees it and makes the connection. She said, I remember he came to Hollywood and I missed him. I didn't go. And she said, I remember though, this man, and she said, I'd like to go to this place. And long story short, a lady, Eileen Coates, who didn't really at that time know Elizabeth and Kitty that well, but she knew of them and had met them, and she was in a party for Miss Pitts, and they were all standing there, and Eileen said, well, I can arrange that for you. I'll set that up for you. And, you know, Miss Pitts said, oh, that's great. And they set the date. It was like in the next couple of days. I don't know the timing, in 1 day, 2 days. Anyway, she set the time, and my mother was standing there, and Mother sort of perked up and thought, I'd like to do that, too. And Eileen Coates ignored Mother. Like, I'm focusing on the stars. We're gonna, set this up for her, and left Mother out. And Mother got a little disappointed, but then, so be it. Point is, the day came, and Miss Pitts had gone off somewhere else. Because, it was something she sort of interested, but she didn't remember. She broke in gardens or something else. She just did something else. It just went out of her head, I guess, she wasn't there. Now, the interesting thing about this part of the story, again, how Baba is, right? The night before this, when Miss Pitts was supposed to go to the center, the night before, Elizabeth and Kitty came to my mother's theater. And Norina had just passed away. There had been the funeral. And they didn't want to go to the theater. They had tickets, and they felt Baba would want them to still go to the theater. You know how Baba wanted you not to sort of sit around and mourn and all that? He wanted you to go, be cheerful and all that. And so they were trying hard, and they said, we'll go anyway. We'll go, but we won't go early. We'll go a little late. Why? Because we don't want to have to mingle with the crowd and talk with all the people and answer questions about Norina and I'm sorry and all that. So they said, we'll go late. So they came in at the last minute. Everybody else had gone in. And my mother, for the only time, very rare at least, she was out there taking tickets because she was the producer. And if somebody's sick or not there, what do? As your producer, you're out there doing it, right? You're the whatever it is, and she's the ticket taker. So she's out there taking the tickets, and in walks Elizabeth and Kitty. Now, Mother said later, I didn't remember this, but Elizabeth remembered that when they came in, Mother opened her arms to them and said, welcome. I'm so happy you've come. We've been waiting for you, like that. And Elizabeth said she looked at her and she felt something very special. And this welcoming. And so they went in. Mother doesn't remember that at all. So didn't remember that at all. So they came in. The next morning was the morning Miss Pitts was supposed to go. And the lady arrived, Eileen, to pick up the star, to take her to the thing. And in those days, you had to go 10 miles from Yukon Dunes, where Kitty and Elizabeth were, all the way into the center. There was nothing at the center. You had to open up the center. You had to pack the food. It was a big deal. And no Miss Pitts. Nobody. And the woman was distraught. She didn't know these ladies that well. They were sitting there with all the food, and what's she going to do, and where's this? And she made a scene in the lobby of the theater. She said, what am I supposed to do? And Carolyn Brenner was working as helping mother, I think it was Carolyn. She said, well, I'm sorry, she's not here. And she went down back to my mother in the office and said, this lady's out here making a scene, and she needs somebody to go. She needs somebody. Will you go? And mother said, no, I'm not going. I wasn't invited. So she felt left, mother left out. Well, you don't know mother, that would be typical. She said, well, too bad. So the lady stayed there, and Eileen made a scene, and she started crying, and all. Carolyn came back and said, Jane, this woman's not leaving, So mother with her work pants on, paint splattered, that, because if you're a producer, you do that too. She said, all right, I'll go. And that's how we came to Baba. So she gets in the car, she goes to the center, and they go down the long thing, and mother's, with no Miss Pitts, his mother is being taken by Eileen Coates, and they come up to the original kitchen where, the picnic was all there and all that, and mother gets out of the car. Elizabeth comes out of the original kitchen, and she says, where's Miss Pitts, or who are you? She says, oh, welcome, I'm so happy. We've been waiting for you. And that was it. The footnote to that story ties back to what we said earlier. Then, of course, Elizabeth shows her around the center and takes her to the different places. You know how it is when you first see the center, this place. Baba was here, this. She drove her over to the place that would become Mother's special place, near Baba's home. And she got out of the car, and Mother got out of the car with Elizabeth, and she looked up. There was the fence. Now that fence is unique, right? That's not just any fence if you've seen it. It's a special looking fence. And Mother immediately recognized that was the fence she saw in her dream. That was the fence.
And the fence that she would look at her.
And then later, that's right, the fence then that she would live across, which was her prayer for Baba, that she could just take care of his home. So that's why Elizabeth had Mayor House built there so that Mother could look out her bedroom window at the fence all the time.
These are just a couple interesting things from that time. So this would have been just a few months after Elizabeth met Jane. And Charles said yesterday Elizabeth went to this Methodist church in Myrtle Beach. So this was the hymn that they had sung in church that day. She wrote it down for Jane. The King of Love, my shepherd is, whose goodness faileth never. I nothing lack if I am his, and he is mine. Welcome to the doorway of anyone. And then this, Charles just found, and it's this poem. Elizabeth loved poetry when she was young, and she had memorized poems, and she wrote some of her own poems, which are in the MeherBabaLibrary journals. And this is a poem she copied out, April 21st. This would have been right before Baba came. And it's addressed, the beloved, I think, is Baba, but it's also addressed to Jane. And it's a poem about, in this context, that Marina had died, and Elizabeth had so much grief, and Marina was so sick in her last years. And then after Marina dies, then there's Jane. My debt to you, beloved, is one I cannot pay, in any coin, in any realm, on any reckoning day. For where is she to measure the debt when all is said, to her who makes you dream again, when all your dreams were dead?
You have to know that original poem, which is, what's her name? I can't remember the poet's name.
Oh, Jessie Bell.
Yeah, so Elizabeth had memorized this poem. Elizabeth loved poetry. We have all the recordings. She loved poetry. But the original poem, it was in the second stanza, he. She changed it to she. She. she memorized the poem, but she changed it to she. So I think the first part she's speaking to Baba, and then the second part she's speaking to Jane. And can I say what the date is? Because I don't want to make it about us, but I found that Wendy found this somewhere in the papers in Myrtle Beach, and she didn't really look at the date. She didn't know the significance of the date for us, but she said you would like to have this. And I said, oh, Wendy, that's so wonderful. What a special thing. It shows how much Elizabeth loved Jane, my mother, and at that time what it meant to her for Jane to come into her life. That's beautiful. And then I looked down at the date. Oh, April 21st. And that's our anniversary of coming. So that's then I gave it to him for our anniversary this year. Yeah.
You mean you keep the poem that you found? I mean,
Yeah.
the date was after you guys had already.
Yes.
got
So
we found this. Wendy found it this spring. I'd never seen it before. It was somewhere hidden in the papers, and we were about to celebrate our anniversary of our meeting, and now we have 2 anniversaries. We got married, so we more than married. But we came together and decided that April 21st, 1989, is our anniversary, and so that's why.
Wow.
So then starting in 57, 58, Jane has this whole new family. And Elizabeth was living in Yukon Dunes during that time with Kitty. And so they started spending holidays together. So this is Christmas, either 57 or 58, we don't know, with Margaret and Elizabeth. Elizabeth is on the far left, and then that's Jane in the middle, and Margaret Trask.
Wow.
Which year is that?
Sorry?
Which year?
It would have been 57.
I think this is it's either the first or second Christmas with Elizabeth that we had in Yukon Dunes, where she was living in the place where Baba stayed after his accident.
Yes.
For a month, Yukon Dunes.
And then this is that Christmas.
Yeah, this is so Elizabeth loved Christmas, and Mother loved Christmas. You know, as you heard earlier, Christmas was such a she had a very hard childhood. We didn't go into it, but we won't need to go into all the detail. But she had a very difficult childhood, and of course her mother had mental illness, and her mother died when she was young. Very difficult, but Christmas was always special. My grandfather used to make Christmas very special. So Mother, every Christmas for us, made it extremely special. Even if we had no money, whatever, she would find a way to make it huge and special. And Elizabeth loved Christmas. And Elizabeth would get out. You know, she didn't like all the things she grew up with, all the china and all this stuff. You know, her parents had all this stuff. She hid it away. But at Christmas, she'd go and she'd get on the ladder, she'd pull down this china, and she'd set this table and all that. So, and she put up a screen so you couldn't see what she was creating. You weren't allowed to peek. You know, so she was just like a child at Christmas, and she loved the whole presents and the tree and everything. So Christmases with Elizabeth were very, very special. So look how wonderful Wendy looks here.
Yeah.
In the front.
So cute.
And Ruth White behind Wendy. Yeah. Ruth White.
Oh, and that's you over there.
That's me.
Yes.
That's me. Yeah.
Is that John behind you?
Yeah.
Yes, that's my brother John.
Oh,
Yeah.
what a darling picture.
John is older than you?
2 years older.
2
Yeah.
years older.
And then is that Margaret Trask across?
Yes, that's Margaret. We spent every Christmas with Margaret. She always came for Christmas, and she came again in the summertime.
And then Baba comes in May of 58. And so I think this is the only picture of Jane with Baba from that visit. So they're on the beach. And so that's Jane just to the left of the umbrella with the scarf around the side of her face.
Yeah.
Looking down.
This is very, very special.
The very first thing he said to her, so this was May 19th, 1958, in the Lagoon Cabin when she first met Baba. And she said, Mayor Baba's first words to me through gestures, through Adi, this disciple speaking. No one understands my suffering. But then her real experience of recognition happened a few days later. And she always thought her special day as being May 22nd.
Yes, I'll try to tell again the heart of the story. And one of the beautiful things about her story, which I think speaks to us today, is that she didn't immediately recognize Baba in the deepest sense when she met him physically. Sometimes people may have, I don't think you do, because you know Baba so well. They think, well, you know, if you meet him, right, it would be different, but not so, really. People met him and knew they liked him and all that. But that wasn't recognition. And that was how it was for her. She liked him, she felt drawn to him, and she wanted to feel something deep because she loved Elizabeth and Kitty already, you see, so she wanted to feel, right? She wanted to. So, first, that she met him the 19th. Then she brought my brother, she brought me the 21st, as I said last night. And then, the night of the 21st, or early morning 22nd, really speaking, I wake up in my room, which is all the way, there's a little extra room added on. It's now the treehouse at the center, we can stay in it. But so it was a separate little thing that Elizabeth built for me off the porch. And so it's very far from Mother's bedroom. And I wake up in the middle of the night, and this happened a lot with me with my mother, and I wake up, and I don't know why, and I go in through the house, have to go through the porch, go into the house, and I go into her bedroom, and she's sitting up, and she's weeping. She's weeping. And I say, Mother, what's wrong? Couldn't speak. Just couldn't speak. So I tried to comfort her, and I just left and went back to my room. What had happened was that she woke up in those early morning hours, and she heard her name, Jane. And the room, she said, was filled with this beautiful smell like jasmine flowers. And then she went into a deep sleep. The next morning she woke up, and she knew that she had to get immediately to the center. Even before it was supposed to be time, she knew she had to immediately go to the center. And through a series of circumstances, I was able to go with her. So now this is the morning of May 22nd. So she goes to the barn, where Baba is to greet and meet with everyone. And she waits outside, because she knows this is where Baba is going to come. It's still very early, but she just felt compelled to be there. She goes outside. She waits, and finally Baba arrives. People arrive, they line up, as Baba's going to enter into the barn. The car arrives. Baba, of course, has to be.
That's not.
I'll wait for a second. So Baba has to be helped and carried from the car in a chair because of his hip. You've seen in the films how Baba, he could walk a little, but he had to be carried by the dancers or others in turns. And Baba was going through the crowd to get into the barn. And as he was approaching the door of the barn, he has them stop the chair. And he finds Mother in the crowd. And he says, Jane, how did you sleep last night? Did you sleep well? And Mother didn't know what to say, because she had woken up and she'd been weeping, and then she went into this deep sleep, so she didn't quite know what to say. So she didn't say anything about it. And he went into the barn. And then during that session in the barn, one of the things that Baba wanted to talk about that day, discourse he wanted to give, was on the meaning of deep sleep. And how in deep sleep we return to God, to our true self. Which is why it's so important. Not just physically important, it's spiritually important. So Baba gave this discourse. And then he left the barn, got ready to go, helped out, put in the chair, and again everyone was there waiting for him to come out. And again, he's going through the crowd. He says, stop. And again he finds my mother in the crowd. Jane. Now I have to tell you that until this time, not only had she not recognized Baba, but she didn't feel Baba had ever looked at her fully. The whole time. That was her experience. So he says, Jane. And he finds her, and for the first time, in her experience of the whole time they'd been there, Baba looks her right in the eyes. And he says, Jane, Baba wants to know, did you sleep? And Mother looked at Baba, and inside, she heard Baba speak to her and say these words. Yes, Jane, it is I. And then she knew. Then she knew who he was, who he is. So that's how she came to Baba, in the middle of the night.
Then there was a moment in the barn that had a profound impact on her and that launched a whole aspect of her life. And it's when Baba raised the topic of Saint Teresa of Avila, the 16th century Spanish saint and Carmelite nun and founder of convents. And Baba asked people in the barn, what do you know about Saint Teresa? And there was this variety of responses that people talked about her being a founder of convents, that she wrote books about her mystical experiences, her visions. And Baba gestured and said, yes, all these things are true. But the most important thing was that she devoted her entire life to Jesus Christ, to me. And Jane wrote about this. I had never before heard the words Saint Teresa. At that moment, when Baba spoke of her great love for Christ, he gave me a deep inner longing to know about her and study her works. The happiness in his eyes and the exquisite gesture of his hand when he said that she devoted her entire life to Christ above. My heart simply surged with the impulse to cry out, I would do so too. I want to try to love you that way. And then soon after that morning, Jane found all about his connection with Avila. He had gone there in 1933 with a group of disciples, that while he was there, he had said, I am so happy here. And then he said it was one of the 4 great spiritual centers in the Western world. And these are just a couple of artifacts that we thought were interesting. This is a photo that Narina had bought during that trip in Avila in 1933 of the statue of St. Teresa while she was with Baba. And then this is interesting. This is a postcard that Narina had sent to Elizabeth. Elizabeth was not on that trip to Spain, but Narina was there with Baba. And they visited Avila Cathedral, which is what you see in this photo, this beautiful Gothic cathedral. It's the church where St. Teresa was baptized. October 24th, 1933. At the bottom, St. Teresa is the saint we visited. And then this is what's on the back. So she's writing to Elizabeth, Darling, we visited this church with Baba, a rare happening. It is a place of old contacts, memories, like Assisi. Spain is to all of us well known. Tonight, Madrid, perfect atmosphere. Travel bureau made a mess. Baba mentions you constantly. And while Baba was there, Baba said, I've been here before. This is a spot where I have been. So Jane learned all about St. Teresa. She read her writings. She learned more about St. Teresa from Baba's biographer, Charles Curtin, whose book is there in the bookstore, The God Man. One of his English disciples. You know who you see in the 1930s film, reading out Bob's alphabet for it. And he and Jane became very good friends, and he also loved St. Teresa, and he gave her his copies of St. Teresa's books. Sorry? So that's Pergamum on the left, and this, I think this may be at the theater.
Yeah.
This is a letter he wrote to her on October 19th, 1958, so just a few months after they had met. Dear Jane, I wonder what you're doing, and try to picture you at home, not very successfully. I read St. Teresa every night, and I've nearly completed it. I shall then read for the 100th time her book, The Way of Perfection. I find the echo of your voice in St. Teresa's words. It is very strange. It might be you speaking. That has given me an added pleasure in reading her works. And Jane really not only read but studied St. Teresa's writings. If you look at her copies of Teresa's books, it's like the way my students' books look. At the end of the semester, there's all these annotations in the margins and things underlined and her own little notes. She really worked hard at this. And then she eventually went with Elizabeth May, visited all 17 of the convents that St. Teresa had founded. They got to be very good friends with some of Teresa's nuns. So this was this lifelong study for her, something that was so deeply important to her spiritual life. She would constantly go back to the writings of St. Teresa. The very last day of Baba's visit at the center, this is a card that Elizabeth gave her years later, but it had this beautiful photo of Baba in 1958 in his pink jacket. The very last day that Baba was there, Jane was really having a panic attack about him leaving. And they were outside and playing this recording of the life of the Buddha. And people were listening to that. And while she was hearing that and seeing Baba, she just started thinking these very, very disturbing thoughts. My insides ached with pain, and my terrible mind said, he's going away. And it will be just like before, all darkness. I now know who he is, that he's leaving, and all will be as it was before. And I cried and sighed. And so the record of the Buddha's life ended, and Baba went into the lagoon cabin, and then she heard Adi's voice say, Jane, come. And so she went to the cabin, and Baba told her to approach, and he embraced her. And then through Adi he said, do not be nervous or afraid. I will always be with you physically. And then when I think about that, I think it's one of the most astounding things I've ever read that Baba said. Because we talk about Baba being with us, his presence being with us, but for him to say, I'll always be with you physically. Summer of 1958, so that's a wonderful picture of Jane around that time with Charles, and Charles' beloved colleague, Buff. She was at this play, Separate Tables, at the theater, and Charles Pernin directed her in that play. This is a few months after.
And Kitty was in it too. Kitty was a waitress. had a cameo role.
Wow.
And then she decided to go to New York. She really wanted to pursue her career as an actress. And she even took a stage name. She called herself Joanne Barry. And we found this wonderful letter from Elizabeth for her in New York, and it said, must I now call you Joanne? But Elizabeth really helped to support all this, and Jane went to school at Lee Strasberg's acting school of method acting. And it was an interesting year in that school. I guess this would have been 59. And in her class at Lee Strasberg School happened to be Marilyn Monroe. And then also, if you're Velvet Underground fans, Nico, the long blonde lead singer who became an actress in Andy Warhol's films. And her theater career was really only a partial success. The high point was when she was in this play called Jolly's Progress with Eartha Kitt, who's on the cover here. And so this is the program, and then the cast list for Eartha Kitt. And but after that, it never really took off. And after a few years, it was time to go to East West Gap.
Yes. So this is just one vignette from the East-West Gathering. So much happened there now. Should I say about how this works here?
Yes, but can you see her? So if you look, front, I'm not going to go up because I'll move the microphone, but front row, third, see second from left, Elizabeth is holding her fan.
Yeah.
You see that? So next to her is Jane, looking at Bob with the glasses.
So this I should say about how this works.
Sure. Well, no, let's do the other thing first. We'll get to that.
All right.
One day, Baba at the East West Gathering gave her his handkerchief and wiped his brow and said, "I love you." Here she is with Elizabeth at the East West Gathering. This is a photo we just found. So we just got this scanner last summer. We've been so excited because we've been scanning all this stuff. And we found this old negative, but here, that's Jane. I don't think she even knew this picture existed. But that's her looking at Bob in this group shot. This is outside group shot, right?
Yes.
And then this is her embracing Bob on the podium.
This happened because they had an arti ceremony. Hindu, in Hindi, and somebody was missing. You had to have, I forgot, what, 7 people, I can't remember. And they all had to be wearing different colors. I don't know. Somebody was missing. And so they recruited Mother, who had a yellow dress on. Now, the reason she had the yellow dress on, which is not her dress at all, is because it had rained unexpectedly, right? In November it never rains, but it did. Poured, and everybody got soaked, and the women Mandali gave some of the Western women clothes to wear. So they switched off the wet clothes and put on clothes from the women Mandali, and Mother got a yellow dress. And so because of that, she was chosen to be sitting in the RD thing, because you had to have so many people with different colors. And so after the Arti was over, Baba was so pleased to see Jane there, and so Baba gave her, she didn't do in between. Very rare, because Baba couldn't just keep embracing. So but he gave her this special embrace, and that's the moment. I'm not sure. We don't know. We know for most of our life, after we saw Baba in 62, Mother thought, and we all did, really, we just assumed this is Wendy.
Oh, yes.
We couldn't remember, Wendy wearing that, but, Wendy, well, it must be. And so we just assumed it was Wendy. And then some years later, Mother realized, oh, that's the dress that the women Mandali had me wear. That's me. So it's the only picture she had like that with Baba. So it's
but there was one episode of the East-West Gathering which was really, I think she would say, was the central point of her entire life. And there's some background to it. And the background is that one of the experiences that St. Teresa had, that she records in her books, is that she had a vision in which she became a kind of mystical bride to Christ. And her vision was that Jesus appeared to her, and he took one of the nails of his crucifixion and handed it to her. And he said, from this day forth, let this be a token that you are my spiritual bride. And Jane loved that episode, and that became her prayer to Baba, if I could be thy bride. So they're at the East-West Gathering, and there was one day that Baba asked for a song to be played, and it turned out to be a wedding song, the recording. And Baba commented on the song, and he said, the bride is leaving her home in the song. And those words struck Jane so deeply because she thought back to St. Teresa's vision and her secret prayer. And then after the Sahavas ended, it was very near the time when the Westerners were all supposed to go home, and there was a wedding that had been held in Pune. And Baba blessed the couple that had been married, and then they gave him the wedding garland and he wore it around his neck. And then Jane went back to the turf club where they were all staying, and Baba had the wedding garland and the bridal bouquet sent to Jane at the turf club. And he said that he wanted to keep them. He wanted her to keep those flowers in her room overnight. She wrote about this. The fragrance of the jasmine and the roses filled my room. This was the confirmation. And then she wrote him a letter the next day. Dearest beloved Baba, if only I could retain in my heart the beauty of last night and dawn this morning, when Ninu and Adi came running down the walk to tell me that you said I was to keep the bridal bouquet and garland in my room all night. I knew in my heart of hearts why you had sent them to me. The fragrance of your love filled my room. I looked at them through the white of the netting, and I knew that it was my bridal chamber. What else could you have meant? When the dawn waked me and soft light filled the room with diffuse splendor, and I felt your sweet fragrance near me, my secret inner prayer to you has now been answered. If I could be thy bride. And so she had this photo taken of herself holding the bridal bouquet.
I had the presence of mind, I don't know how, because I was there with her. I said, Mother, we should save some petals from this. And she hadn't thought to do that, because it was to be sent back. But we did, so we did save some petals.
And this is her copy of one of Teresa's books where Teresa writes about that vision. So at the upper left is the story about the nail. But look at the bottom of the page on the left. It says November 4th, 1960. The beloved said, I love you. And then on the opposite page at the very bottom, Jane wrote, Wedding March, the bouquet, November 8th, 1962. So that she, below that image of Teresa's mystical marriage, she wrote about her own spiritual marriage. This is, I think, the last day. 62. This was the surprise. They didn't expect to see that.
Yes, how Baba is, of course, you all know. This is how he is. So he says, no, it ends now. This is it. You'll never. And Baba gave us the feel and said, you may never see me again this way. So we had to face that on the last day of the East-West gathering, that we may never see him again in the body. I felt that's what Baba meant. So I was facing that, and we all were facing that, and of course it was very painful, and it was over. And then Baba said, he would like us to see where his body is going to be in the tomb, and where he lived in MeherBabaLibrary. See, we were in Pune. So there was a tour planned after the East-West gathering. Baba said he would like us, but not everyone could. Some had to go home. My brother had to go, went home. So some of us stayed to see these places. And then suddenly, the morning of November 10th, word came, anyone who would like, anyone who wants to, may come to Bandar, because Baba is going to stop there on his way back to Ezad. And anyone who wants to come and say goodbye can come there. And of course, we all took that opportunity. And that was the surprise. And of course, we'd already had the tears, right? And now we were free just to be in that beautiful moment with him. He sat under this tree, which is one of the trees that Babajan would sit under. And he would always sit under this tree when he would leave Pune, right? So we were, this is us, and you can see my little blonde head in there in the crowd, just to the whatever it is, right of Baba.
Sydney.
Right
That's
there.
Baba's right. Yeah.
Right there.
Right, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes, that's it. So the point of that is to say that Baba also always gives you an indication of things that he wants them to come. So he looked over at me at one point and he says, Charles, where is your mother? And I didn't know. I had no idea, and I hadn't thought of her the whole time I'd been there in India, really speaking. So I didn't know where she was. And but before I could answer, Baba found her at the edge of the crowd, and she was standing in between Kitty and Elizabeth. And Baba pointed to her, and then he went like this. Three. And little did we know that was the beginning, see, of her change of life. The other indication came that we didn't know what it meant. During the East-West gathering, my mother had arrived in India having gotten a wonderful job in a movie, a wonderful job. After so many years of not getting any really good work, she'd gotten this job, and she was very excited and very happy. Maybe her career was now going to take off. And just before we were ready to leave to see Baba in India, a cable came and said that, I'm sorry, we decided to give it to someone else. So she had this great joy of finally, feeling, I'm going to be a great actress in the theater and all this, and then it was taken away, and then we left for India. And so, long story short, one morning, Baba, it was actually the first morning with the women, I wasn't there, but Mother told me that Baba was having a conversation as he usually did when he would first see you, how are you and your children and that, Baba, how you would want to know. And you didn't ever think, well, why doesn't he know? You'd always think, oh, Baba, yes, Baba, this and that. That's how he was. He made you feel as though he really wanted to know about you and everything. And so the all-knowing one took on that not knowing in order to really be fully there. And really, he was like that, So how many now children? Where? Yeah, all that. So at one point, my mother is sitting over here at his shoulder, right? Just on the sofa, Baba, so she's right here, her spot, but she was always there. And at one point, Baba turns around to her and says, and you, Jane? What work have you? And her mind was paralyzed because, she had this great job, now she'd been taken away, and what was she going to do? And so she didn't have an answer, but what came out spontaneously from her, what just came out, she didn't know where it came from. She said, your work, Baba. It's so clean, Alice. That's Baba said, so be it. You see how he is? He could not, Baba had said, I know you have lost your job. I now see that you will be. Would that be Baba? What a small thing that would be. But what a great thing. When Baba has us tell him what we don't know we have in our hearts. Because then it really is from him in here. And then, so be it. What a great thing. And so it was. Right? So it was. So we come back, and of course, who knew? What, how? But just when we came back, soon after we came back, I wake up in the middle of the night. Again, everything happens in the middle of the night with us. And I feel like I have to go to my mother. She's upstairs in our little brownstone in New York. I'm down here, but I feel like I have to go up there. And in the middle of the night, I go up in her room, and there she's sitting on that horribly uncomfortable French sofa she slept on. We had no living room, so the living room and her bedroom were the same thing. And she was there, sitting up in this thing. And I said, Mother, what's wrong? And she said, Baba, MeherBaba, he is the avatar. I said, yes, right? And she said, he needs to be at the World's Fair. I mean, I think that was a long shot. Religion, I don't know. So Mother was trying, you see, to find any kind of possible space for Meher Baba, and there was none. There was no space. And she looked at all the buildings, and finally she found a building that was about furniture. Furniture, how, sofas and the latest thing in chairs and stuff. And this guy was going to open a furniture, and but why she looked at the name was the Pavilion of American Interior. I'm just saying. Pavilion of American Interiors. And Mother said, that's it. Mother's a furniture building. She said, no, that's it. So she went to see the guy, Mr. Elton, I think his name was. This is wonderful Jewish guy, a developer and all this, and he had this big idea that he was going to make some money because he was going to charge admission, and most of them didn't. And he was going to charge admission, and he was going to make. So he's going to have all these beautiful exhibits of furniture, and it wasn't really selling very well, right? But he was really excited about it. And Mother went to see him. I don't know how she got in to see this guy, and she says, Mr. Elton, I need to get this space for Meher Baba, and he said, what? He said, lady, this is furniture. What are you talking, Meher Baba? This is furniture. And she said, no, this is it. I would be very nice and all that. And he said, lady, you don't understand. This is kitchens. You got kitchens. You got sofas. What are you talking about, Meher Baba? He said, yeah. Oh, but we just haven't tried everything. There's no space. He said, yeah, but lady, this is. And she said, oh, God, all that man. And she started to cry. Now, if you knew my mother, boy, that was really something. And he said, oh no, lady, don't cry. Don't, no. All right, okay, fine. You can have a space. All right, fine. The truth is, he wasn't selling a lot of those spaces anyway, right? So he said, you can have a space. So we were the only non-furniture. And he put us all the way up at the top of it's like a spiral, and he put us all the way up at the top. There it is. There's the space.
So there's Charles, and you see Kitty.
Kitty's there and all that.
And then the lady off to the far left in the long coat and the blue hat, Edith Bradley.
Edith Bradley.
So, how some of you last night said that Charles is a good mimic? Like, if you really want to hear a funny imitation, ask him to do Edith Bradley.
So, the thing is that people volunteered, all the old timers, right? So, Fred and Ella volunteered. Kitty came up and lived in New York with us and volunteered for like a month at a time to be at the space. Fred and Ella were at the space. John Batts was at the space, right? And so we gave out Meher Baba's Universal Message, which was created for this purpose. That pamphlet was created for this. And guess what? You know how Baba actually sent a message saying that he wanted his lovers to make this possible. He raised the funds. Baba, you know how rare that is? It was unprecedented. Baba never did that. Baba said, yes, I want this. And so, because Baba said it, people gave, their $5, their $10, whatever, and so raised the funds to do this. And then what to give out? Well, designed the Meher Baba's Universal Message. And Baba gave a message for it, and then picked a picture. There was this young Baba that Elizabeth loved this picture that she always had over the mantle. The 1940s picture, she loved this picture. They sent it all to Baba, and Baba looked at it and said, no, I don't want that picture. I want a picture how I look now. I want them to see how I am now. So that's why in the original Universal Message is that older picture of Baba in the middle. We called it the Sadra picture. Right? So the Sadra picture is the one Baba selected to have in the and so many stories about the World's Fair, I won't get off, but it was such an extraordinary experience. And the only thing I will say about the furniture is that volunteering there was really, really a trial because, of course, right before you got to the MeherBaba's we were the last thing. You walk up a spiral, like the Guggenheim Museum, you walk up the spiral, and you finally get to the top, exhausted, and there's MeherBaba. So people walking up these boring furniture exhibits, really. But some of them, there was nobody live. There were a couple of them had animated elves singing ditties. So one year us had the animated elves singing something about furniture. I don't remember. It was like, and we, of course, sitting there had to listen over and over again to this terrible animated elf thing. And it was such a trial. So this is the thing, and people would go up, and of course, they'd go up and walking, and there'd be no people, and there was this furniture, and then they'd come around the last curve, and there'd be one of us there with MeherBaba's Universal Message, and we'd say, "Would you like MeherBaba's Universal?" They'd go, "Ah!" Because they didn't expect a real person. And they would always accept the invitation to sit down, because we had a little place for them to sit. They were so grateful, with the message, right? They got like 1 million of those things. And, and we even had John Bass volunteer there, who was in charge of all the books. John Bass would sell the books out of his little apartment in Harlem, And John had a speech impediment, right? So nobody could understand John Bass, right? So he would talk, he'd be, you couldn't really, unless you knew him really well, you couldn't understand a word he said. He had this big bulldog face. He was Marina's bouncer during those lectures in New York. He just stood next to you when you'd shut up. Right? Just a big bulldog face. So John was there volunteering. Everybody got to volunteer. It didn't matter whether you could speak or not. Right? And so he was there because you know why he volunteered? Because he wanted to get rid of some of those books. He had a whole apartment full of Baba's books that nobody wanted, right? God Speaks. He had a lot of signed God Speaks stacked to the ceiling. Nobody wanted this stuff. And John Bass was the sole source for getting MeherBaba's books, right? So you got to Harlem, walk up, and there they were. So he was lugging them all over to Flushing Meadows to move the books, right? And so people would come up and he'd say, he sold so many books. Oh yeah, sure. So that was the tip of the World's Fair iceberg. What an experience. And that transition to our life in Myrtle Beach.
So in 1965, at Baba's request, Jane moved to Myrtle Beach to help Elizabeth and Kitty at the center. I love this picture of the three of them together in the meeting place, I think.
Baba's directive that she should go and help Elizabeth and Kitty. Baba's directive, not her whim.
There are the three of them. I think this was at somebody's wedding. Yeah. Jane and Elizabeth in the meeting place. And this is how many of you knew her life of service at the center, which was both wonderful for her and hard, because she was such a private person. She liked being able to retreat into her room and to read and to pray, and it was really her role there to be greeting people every day. And she rose to the occasion, but it came with some strength. She was very devoted to the poor in Myrtle Beach and to the families that lived in the very poor African-American neighborhood called Race Pack. And there's a whole story about that. You all know Happy Club, so Happy Club they would bring these poor kids to the center for play and for lunch. And Jane kept that going for years.
She also founded Friendship House, and they just called me about having an anniversary celebration of 50 years, gosh. And they give free health care to all of these folks who have no health care in this area of South Carolina. So that, Mother founded that, she got doctors to volunteer. So it wasn't just Happy Club, but that was, we started community service council at the high school when I was in high school there. And from that, when we left, Mother transformed it into community volunteer services, friendship house, and so much more. So the legacy of that work kept spreading and spreading. It's still going.
This was the 60s and 70s, a time of a lot of travel with Elizabeth. They would have an annual trip. And this is the very last cable she got from Baba. And they were in Spain. And Jane liked that she received it on Charles's birthday on July 22nd, 67, from Baba, Ellie Jane. He called me Ellie Jane. This morning, before entering 4 months of very strict seclusion, I send my love blessings to you and Jane for your birthday in old age. So Elizabeth's birthday was July 26th, a few days later. So they were going to Spain to visit more of St. Teresa's convent. So Jane continued that lifelong interest in her. And this she loved. So Monty knew how devoted she was to Teresa, and one day sent her this rock that had been collected when Baba was in Avila in 1933. So sent to your birthday, July 22nd, 1978. And many trips to India, of course, and Mera. And she, there was one conversation with Mera that especially struck her. Jane had always had some feeling that she might have been, in her previous life, Baba's disciple Nervous. And she felt that she had some clues to that. One was when he told her at the very end of the sentence that don't be nervous or afraid. And then she recorded in her journal, she talked about this conversation with Mera, which I think occurred in the 1970s. And she said, one day on the veranda in the 70s, dearest Mera and I were somehow alone just before the bell rang. She said suddenly and totally out of context, so this is Mera speaking now. One day I was talking to Nervous in 1922 outside the old post office. My mother and I had not long come there to be with Baba. It was just for a few moments. All at once Baba suddenly appeared and in a strong voice sent each of us away to her work. Later he told me, do not ever speak to any of the men for any reason. And now this is Jane speaking again. Mera was smiling all the while, that smile of such purity and such beauty that it cannot ever be described. Her eyes were sparkling. She even giggled a little as she relived the early incident. I feel in my heart of hearts that Mera was sharing a memory that was just for us. I knew that for whatever reason her beloved prompted this mention to me. Whether my soul was present with him as Nervous in the 20s when his great mission began or not is not really important, though it gives me joy to contemplate having been so close, living with the Master when he began his work this time, and to have glimpsed his beloved Mera. But even if that is not so, I know that he has always been with me, always. I love to repeat that refrain that he sings to us each time he comes. Wherever you go, whatever you do, I want you to know I'm following you. Praise Baba forever and ever. Amen. And I recall, again, Baba's beloved's last words to me in the Lagoon Cabin on May 29, 1958. Do not be nervous or afraid. I will always be with you physically. Jane with Kitty at the center. With Elizabeth in India. And she said this is her very favorite picture of herself. She loved mine so much, and this is one of the few pictures of herself that she really liked. I finally got to meet her in 1987, and I had a teacher in high school who knew that I was very interested in spirituality, and I got interested in St. Teresa. And that's a long story. My mom had spontaneously given me one of St. Teresa's books without my having asked for it. So I was very immersed in her life and her writings. And he was a Bible lover, and he said, this is Columbia, South Carolina. He said, you know, if you are so interested in the life of St. Teresa, you have to go to Myrtle Beach. Because there's this lady there who knows all about her. And she's visited her convents and has read her books. And I thought, well, really? Myrtle Beach? That's where I went to ride go-karts and buy seashells. And then he later told me about Baba, and so I was very drawn to going to this place, both because of Baba and I wanted to meet this lady who knew all about St. Teresa. And of course, that was Jane. And I remember so vividly what it was like going to her house, in the Mayer house. And some of you who have been there, remember how it was kind of set up so it felt like a Spanish convent? And there were these iron grill gates that led into the living room, and then all this old Spanish furniture that had come from Elizabeth's family, and she had these images of St. Teresa, and so there was something about it that felt so special. And then there was just an immediate sense of familiarity. And then that afternoon is really when I had my experience of Baba at the center of my experience of recognition. But the nice thing about that is that was May 21st, which was the day Charles met Baba years earlier. That's right. We have lots of little synchronicities like that.
That was May 21st, 1987.
Charles and I moved there in 1994 because we felt that it was important to be there to help with her work. And we had wonderful times just being with her. And times when she was very happy were things like going out to eat, going to antique stores, having a meal at our house, going swimming at Kingston Plantation, going to see a movie and getting chocolate-covered almonds, stuff like that. She loved watching opera videos that I'd gotten, recalling her trips with Elizabeth. She loved going to Mepkanappy, which is this Trappist monastery near Charleston, and she had a very dear friend there, Father Anthony, who had been one of Thomas Merton's confessors. And he became a kind of spiritual companion to her in the last years of her life. The last years of her life were very hard ones because in 1994 was a very different time, long before the Supreme Court decision that happened last week. And there was some opposition to Charles and I being there and to being at Baba's center as a gay couple. And Jane really ended up taking a lot of the brunt of that. And it was very, very difficult for her. And but actually it really just drew her deeper, I think, into her spiritual life and made her work even harder at prayer and her study. So this was a journal entry she wrote around that time. "Oh Lord, please help me to stay in prayer constantly within words of praise and thankfulness. If I can stay in prayer constantly, this will lead to full surrenderance to you, to your will. This surrenderance means full trust in you, you alone. This full trust is evidence of love for you, because trust is love and love leads to trust." So she stayed so anchored in Baba during that time, when some people were giving her a really hard time and saying some very mean things. In 1996, she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, so one of the most pernicious cancers. And she decided to get a surgery that was supposed to remove some of the tumor, even though everyone knew it would just be a temporary fix. And when she went to the surgery, she carried that favorite little picture of Baba holding the lamb or the goat, whichever animal that is. She loved that picture, and she called it her lammy picture. And she couldn't, I guess it was like anesthesia, but she would use hand gestures kind of like Baba, and she would make these signs that say, "I love Baba and I love you." But there was a recurrence of her cancer several months after that surgery, so she didn't have long. So this was Christmas of 96. And she was resigned to it, so she wrote us in 96. "Dr. McKay does not recommend the aggressive anti-tumor chemotherapy and radiation treatment. It would mean 4 to 5 weeks of hospitalization and tube feeding, 20% of recurring pancreatic cancer patients, so some benefit, but statistics are not very good. But all that is in beloved Baba's hands only. I only ask him for the inner strength to realize that all he gives us is for my spiritual good, whether pain, whatever may come. He is trying so hard to bring me closer to him. I know this in some strange way, and I'm determined to find him in this, what appears to be darkness." And during that period, you'll know Bob Aarons gave her wonderful medical care and would come over all the time to help. So she was surrounded by a lot of love. This was taken just a couple weeks before then. This was Easter Sunday, and she received this little bunny called Violet that she sold, stuffed bunny. So this is just a couple weeks before she died.
Oh, see.
Huh? That's me.
Oh,
younger.
yes.
Then she died on April 11th, 97, just a few minutes before 5 in the morning. We're just going to close with two things that happened around that time. No, really two events that stand out in our memory about her passing. And one was, this is the time when the comet was coming through, the Hale-Bopp comet. And we used to look for her outside, and beginning around April 1st, it was becoming more and more visible, and we kept looking for it in the sky, but never really saw it at Myrtle Beach. But then the night that she died, we walked outside of Mayor House and were walking towards her studio, and there was that comet, so bright, right over the center. It was the first time we really saw it. And then soon after she died, I was writing my dissertation on St. Teresa, and I was reading these accounts of what St. Teresa's nuns wrote after she died. And they said that one of the miracles around her death was that they saw a comet outside of the window of her convent cell. And they took this as this special sign. And then there was this other thing that happened. And it was just a few hours before she died. And I was in her bedroom with Jane was in bed. And by this time, she was not doing anything. She was taking a lot of morphine. She had a drip. And I was in there with Sandy Lyons. So we were both taking care of her with Charles and me. And so it was the afternoon, just before the evening she died, and we were both looking out the window of her bedroom toward Bob's house, where there's that fence that she loved so much. And I noticed that something was odd. And then, without my saying anything, Sandy said, "That's so weird." And I said, "What?" And she said the same thing that I was thinking. So Sandy and I both look out the window, and Sandy says, "That's strange." And I said, "Yes, it is." And it turned out that we were both talking about the same thing, which is that when we looked out the window, Baba's house was closer than it had been. And we both said, "Are you serious?" And we had both looked out that window so many times, and there was something different. There was something different. And it made me think of the song that Baba had played in 1962, "The Bride is Leaving Her Home." And that's the moment when Jane was leaving her home. So I like to think that Baba moved his home, right up against hers, so that when she left her, she could go right in. Well, we thought we'd close by playing that song, the Wherever You Go song that Baba loved and that she loved so much. So this is...
We're not going to sing it.
No, we're not going to sing it.
We'll play it, early version.
Yeah. So this is a picture that Mara sent to Jane in the 60s. So here's the song. So this is an old 1930s recording of it.
You say that you're going away.
Who's singing it?
I can't remember the singers.
What's the name of it again?
Wherever you go,
Wherever You Go.
I'm following you.
You say that you're going away. You think that I'll be lonely, just as sad and blue as I can be. I'll say if you're going away, I've just one idea. Only don't think you'll ever get rid of me. Wherever you go, whatever you do, I want you to know I'm following you. Whatever you climb or jump into, why all of the time I'm following you. The battle won't be half so hard if you've someone to share it. I'll gladly carry half the load, what's more, grin and bear it. You're part of my heart.